everyone, I'm Jasmine Haynes, and I'm here with David Stotts today, who is the Conference Treasurer, Director of Finance and Administration, and Benefits Officer. Hi, David.
Hey, Jazz.
Thank you so much for being with us here today to kind of clear some things up. Shortly after General Conference, there were 11 district gatherings planned, and you all went all over the state to explain to people what came out of General Conference. So for those who were not able to attend their own local district gatherings, speak to us today about a few things that happened. Now, specifically, your portion of the district gatherings had to do with administrative things. One of the first things that came up at General Conference that were being dealt with the nature of administration and money. Why was that?
It was really important to understand that was the first thing dealt with because it made it fair to everybody. It was a way of respecting all that were in attendance. And so as we looked at what administrative things would have to happen, we said, let's pass those first so that then when we moved into a plan, we would not have to address administrative items after deciding what would happen going forward as United Methodist Church. So it was basically fair to everybody.
David, there were two WestPath petitions pertaining to pensions. One pertained to how pensions affect churches and one how they affect clergy. Explain how that petition affects churches.
It affects the churches not only in what was happening at General Conference 2019, but it affects the churches that are closing because of loss of membership, lack of viability. Whatever a reason a church would close, this was an effect on it because churches, as we were active from 1982 forward, we entered into covenant agreements that we wanted to provide pensions to our pastors. And so we agreed that as churches, we would fund those retirement pensions. So if we have less churches to fund, that means that we're going to be missing some money to be able to fund the pensions for our pastors. So what this does, it allows when a church closes, either because of abandonment or because it's no longer viable or because they want to disaffiliate, it allows them to pay a pension contribution that I like to call a covenant contribution because I'm completing my covenant and then I'm leaving for whatever the reason is. And this will apply to any church in the future that closes. It just allows us as a local church to meet our contribution covenant and to fund the pensions for the clergy that will retire in the future that have served the churches so well. And it allows us then to say we're still working together in the connection even when our churches close.
Okay. So we've talked about how this impacts churches. The next part of this is how does the pension petition impact clergy?
The pension petition of impacting clergy had two effects on it. Number one, what the people need to understand is that if a clergy's not leaving the denomination, nothing affected them. It was a wonderful thing to be able to say, only the ones that are affected are the ones that would be leaving the conference. Now, this petition not only dealt with the 2019 action, but it dealt with any reason a clergy would surrender their credentials. So this is a long-term fix to a situation where we have defined benefits.
Hold on, David. Repeat that again so everybody will be clear about if you're not leaving, nothing changed.
All right, so here's the way we can say it. If you're not leaving the church, nothing changed, and you can kind of take a nap during the part of this question. Okay. Let's put it that way. That way people get a nap out of the deal.
Okay.
But if somebody's going to leave from the church by surrendering their credentials, then that, if the pension had not changed, we would have had a defined benefit, a long-term payment for the whole life of that person, which then ties the person to the church that they have left, but it also ties the church to owing money and having market risk over the lifetime of that clergy. So it's really two pieces. So if a clergy leaves the denomination by surrendering their credential, then they will be immediately paid what they had earned as of the date they left for the time they served, and does not put a liability on the churches to pay something, but it also doesn't tie that clergy to a denomination that they decided to leave. And so it really becomes fair to everybody, and this was a fix that was for every occasion in which a clergy leaves, not just because of what happened at General Conference 2019.
David, as there's discussion about pensions and the petitions pertaining to that, there were a lot of petitions that were passed during General Conference, but then they were submitted to Judicial Council for declaratory decision, which just means that they were checking the constitutionality of the petitions that were submitted. So, when do these pension petitions come into effect?
That's a good question, Jazz, because what happened was everything went to Judicial Council with the exception of the 2 pension petitions.
Okay.
And those were effective at the close of General Conference at 6:30 that afternoon. So they were immediately effective and apply going forward from that day and are not going to Judicial Council for review.
Talk about disaffiliation. Help people understand what that is and how that affects the church coming out of General Conference 2019, David.
All right, good question. Coming out of General Conference 2019, there had to be a way for churches that disagreed with what happened at General Conference to basically be able to remove themselves from the United Methodist Church. This was a graceful exit, as we called it at one time, but the petition became known as disaffiliation. So what happens is if a church says in their resolution that they are not happy with the stance taken on human sexuality by GC 2019, then they can disaffiliate. Disaffiliation occurs by having a church conference where 2/3 of the professing members vote to disaffiliate from the United Methodist Church. Now, when they make that vote, then the process would simply be they would make their pension payment. That's that covenant agreement payment that we talked about. They would be required to pay 2 years of the mission shares for both conference and the district, and upon payment of that, then the church will receive a document, a legal document, that signs over the trust clause, removing it from the deed, and they're able to take all their assets and walk away. This is totally different than a situation where a person decides to leave the denomination by surrendering their membership. Now, that's what happened prior to General Conference 2019. As you recall, we had a few churches that were not happy with things that were going on, and so they wanted to leave.
Right.
They had to go in and make the decision they wanted to turn in their membership. The trustees then received the property after the superintendent and cabinet closed the church, and then the trustees could dispose of the property according to the discipline to whoever was interested in buying, including that church that had disaffiliated, and it really was a disaffiliation after they had surrendered their membership prior to General Conference 2019, and they had formed them a new church. And so they were able to buy the property, but they had to pay fair market value for the property, the assets, the personal property, as well as cash in the bank and everything involved. Mm-hmm. And so if a church closes because they, for any reason other than the human sexuality, that's the process still. General Conference did not change that.
Okay.
Only if they disagree with what happened at General Conference 2019 can they truly disaffiliate. And that's a time frame that was supposed to start at the close of General Conference 2019 through December the 31st, 2023. But the resolution, the Brewster resolution that sent all of this to Judicial Council to review, also sent this petition. So until Judicial Council rules on the constitutionality of this new paragraph, disaffiliation cannot be handled. Once the ruling comes through, then whatever they tell us at that point, then we'll know how to handle this new paragraph. But again, it's only available through December 31st, 2023, if the church, the congregation of the church, says we disagree with what happened at General Conference, and they do it in writing prior to December the 31st, 2023.
Okay. David, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule today.
Yeah.
to explain all this to us. And if you'd like to find out more information and see David's video in its entirety, his presentation from the district gatherings, you are welcome to watch that from the conference website. Also, I invite you to stay connected and stay informed. And you can follow us on the conference Facebook page at the Mississippi United Methodist Conference. You can also opt into getting our news and updates from the conference website.